Hello again and welcome back to Southeast Texas Weekly. I'm Kevin Steele. Great to have you with us. Joining us today to talk politics, Southeast Texans always love to see these gentlemen. Kent Walston with Brannock, Walston and DeVenzio, and Shane Howard, Jefferson County Tax Assessor Collector and staunch Republican, staunch conservative. Good to see you, gentlemen.
Capitalist.
Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
In Washington this week, extraordinary events with Congressman Paul Ryan's package, trying to sell it in Washington, in fact, on a package of reforms to Medicare and other programs that are health and human services type programs. Is it going to work? Is it going to work? Is there any way that it can be revived?
Well, I believe so. I mean, we're talking about the specific bill right now, and obviously that did not pass out. But what's beginning to happen is we're having a conversation about entitlement reform generally, and that is actually what Paul Ryan has primarily done, is begun a conversation that is not being demagogued by all. It's being demagogued by many. But interestingly enough, you know, former President Clinton and Paul Ryan were at an event together yesterday and had a private conversation that actually got captured on tape. And essentially, you know, the president says, I'm against your bill, but you've brought up the meat of the discussion. And as Congressman Ryan said to him, you know the numbers, something has to get done. You know, I'm throwing a ball out there to get the game started. And that's what needs to take place so that we can move beyond demagoguery and come up with some real solutions, because what we're doing is not working.
Not working so far, and there has to be something done. The CBO estimates are that all these programs are in dire straits.
Is 2024 is when
right.
Go under.
Has the administration done enough, in your view, to satisfy you that things are being done to try to save these programs?
No, I think Clinton hit it right on the head. You know, Clinton balanced the budget when he was in office, ran a taut ship economically, fiscally, and I think that these entitlements have to be addressed. Clinton knows it. He was telling Ryan that. The Democrats need to wake up. You know, the American people are not going to follow that. Now, having said that, cutting Social Security and cutting aid to the elderly and to the very young, I think, you know, is going to hurt the Republicans immensely. It hurt them in New York recently.
Very good point.
When a Democrat was elected in mostly a Republican district.
Except no cuts have been proposed.
No, but there, you know, but Ryan's plan pushed, you know, the Social Security issue to bring it to the states and have the states deal with it. And it's going to reform or redo Social Security like we've never seen it before.
Right. The point that Mr. Wilson is making is that in New York State, in the congressional race, the Republicans said, let's reform Medicare, which turned out to be a sacred cow to a great many of the constituents, and the Republican was summarily turned out in what should have been an easy victory for the
candidate, and this is what Republicans need to stop being afraid of, is to go out there and passionately and with conviction state the argument, because the truth is on our side. The bottom line is the status quo is failing us, and what happens is when people, we know that the public is scared naturally, and so when all the more reason to be more passionate, because otherwise what people begin to do is think, and especially when you have the demagoguery and the money being spent telling people you're going to throw grandma off the cliff and things like this, people, you have a higher hurdle that you have to necessarily carry, and the only way to do that and earn people's trust is to be passionate, to be articulate about it, as I'm being inarticulate, and you know, and speak forcefully about what the truth is.
Well, we as Americans, we all have elderly family, we all have young children, we all have individuals that we know that can't afford health care, can't afford to take care of their children, and these Social Security issues are in some entitlements are very vital to some families. And when you start wanting to push grandma off a cliff, or you start talking about cutting Social Security to the elderly, you know, my dander gets up.
But nobody is proposing cutting anything. What we are talking about is changing the method and manner in which it's funded and distributed, and that's a major difference.
But there are some CBO estimates that by privatizing Medicare, you essentially are providing less services, and it is going to cost as much. There's some estimates that
you're relegating that service to the states, and the Republicans have always griped with this health care plan that it's insurmountable because the cost to the states will be too high.
Well, it's one
Texas
thing when
is
it's
one
an
of them.
unfunded mandate,
Exactly, it's
though.
unfunded mandate. But if you send all of the responsibility for Social Security and some of these entitlements to the states, you've done the same thing that the Republicans are griping about, and now they're proposing that.
Well, let's come back to Texas if we can.
Okay.
The sanctuary cities legislation in Austin was defeated in the Texas Senate, begging the question, what is wrong with allowing Texas law enforcement authorities to ask what a person's legal status is? A question we must ask our friend Kent Woolston today. I mean, what's wrong with
As a lawyer and
allowing?
ex-cop, huh?
Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with allowing our law enforcement to say, hey, are you a U.S. citizen?
You know, I have no problem during a commission of a crime and arrest to ascertain the citizenship of an individual. I don't care who they are. But to have law enforcement go ask individuals, are you a citizen? Let me see your documentation. I wouldn't like it if they did it to me. And there are so many Hispanics in Texas, a large amount of Hispanics that were born here in Texas. A lot of my friends that are Hispanics were born here. Why should a policeman go, and I'm an ex-cop, why should a policeman go to them and say, show me your papers? I don't like it. I don't think it's necessary.
In the commission of a crime and an arrest, no problem whatsoever, but I'm not going to show my papers to anybody. I'm going to tell a cop that comes and tells me to show my ID without having due cause to go jump in a lake. Thank you.
So your view is that the Arizona legislation that was that is supported summarily by a very large percentage of Arizonans, you would not support that kind of legislation.
Well, a lot of what was the Arizona law has been distorted by those that were opposed to it. It's primarily after an arrest, after a traffic stop, things like that, and I support that. What I didn't support in the Arizona law was the idea that if I picked up somebody on the side of the street as a good citizen, that I could be charged with trafficking human beings. I know what they were trying to accomplish, and it was a good thing, but oftentimes, once you set things in policy, that's why we have to be a little bit more careful about how we craft these things, make sure we're not accidentally violating the Fourth Amendment and other rights that Americans have.
But the Arizona law, actually, in its initial stages, the Arizona law was going to allow a law enforcement officer to ask you your legal status, independent of whether you were being arrested, just off the street.
And for me, that's a problem.
That's a problem for me. I don't want to go, an Hispanic friend of mine, to go get a pizza and be stopped for traffic and say, you know, anybody, but especially Hispanics, it adversely affects Hispanics. That's what it's directed at. To go get a pizza and be stopped for traffic and say, show me your papers. That's crazy.
Texas definitely stepped into a serious fight with the federals when it came to this matter of TSA screenings, Transportation Security Administration screenings, and it has been dubbed the groping bill, so to speak, by some. After a long view, Texas legislator came up with a bill that said only certain private parts can be touched in Texas Airlines. That bill failed. Was it good law? Was it overreaching?
It was overreaching. You know, we've got failures in federal policy, including within the TSA, that cannot be addressed because of the way things are constructed. This goes all the way back to when we took screening out of the hands of the private airlines in the first place, federalized it, and then unionized it as well. And so then when the states abrogate their power to a certain extent, they're going to have to live with the consequences, which means the funding and everything else that goes along with it. And so while I understand and I support philosophically what they were trying to do, it was bad policy. It would have unintended consequences that the very people trying to pass it would not be willing to live with.
Okay, I understand. Let's come back and talk more about this issue in just seconds on Southeast Texas Weekly. An Oakland, California elementary school now teaching lessons on diversity by using a clownfish that is a transgender clownfish. The full story and what our gentlemen think about that right after this break.